Okay, the Torah portion this week is Parshas Vayishlach, and Parshas Vayishlach, very interesting. The beginning of the Torah portion is about Jacob, sending emissaries. The emissaries are real angels. He sends them to Esav, and he sends a message with them to Esav, his brother. Now, Esav is the guy who it's his twin brother who wants to kill him, wants to kill Jacob. And Esav sends a whole long message. What is his message? That I lived with Lavan and I've lingered there until now. And Rashi tells us something very interesting. I lived with Lavan. Number one is he's saying I'm not, I didn't create a whole dynasty. I haven't, you shouldn't hate me for getting the blessings because they haven't really been fulfilled. I've just lived like a stranger with Lavan. And then Rashi brings another explanation. And the other explanation is that I've kept the mitzvahs. I lived with Lavan, and yet I kept the mitzvahs that I didn't learn from his bad ways. Now, why is Yaakov telling Lavan, telling Esav, his brother, that I just want you to know I've been keeping all the mitzvahs and I didn't learn from Lavan? Why is he telling him that? I would think if he wants to talk about baseball, that might be something that Esav might be interested in, or about drinking beer. Maybe he wants to know a little about drugs, anything that might be of interest to Esav. I could see maybe, they might be able to find some common ground. But why is he talking to Esav about, Esav, I just want you to know I've been keeping mitzvahs. What does Esav care? It's almost like it's totally not up Esav's alley. Why is he telling Esav that he's been keeping the mitzvahs? And this is a simple Rashi that everyone seems to learn. It's a very famous Rashi, but it just doesn't seem to flow. The verse says, I lived with Lavan. And Rashi says, guess what? The gematria of live is Taryag, 613. And that's the amount of mitzvahs there are. So Jacob is telling Esav, his brother, I kept all the 613 mitzvahs. I don't think that's something that's so exciting. If you told him you ran the marathon, Esav would be impressed. If you told him you were hunting and you learned how to shoot, you learned how to aim, and maybe Esav would like that. You're good at bowling. I think Esav would be impressed. You've done, but if you tell him that you're interested in, you've done mitzvahs, that's doesn't seem like that's up Esav's alley. Now, that's one discussion in the Torah portion. Another thing later on in the Torah portion is we find that Jacob's name changes. And when his name changes, the verse says, your name should no longer be Yaakov, but rather it should be Yisrael. And the interesting thing about that, here it's in verse 10 on chapter 35. Hashem says to him, your name is Shimcha Yaakov, your name is Jacob. It should not be called anymore Jacob. Rather, Yisrael should be your name. And he called his name Yisrael. And then, if you look verses later, guess what? Verse 15 says Jacob. And Jacob called the name of the place Basel. So the verse tells us no longer should it be called Jacob, it should be called Yisrael. But yet, we don't find the Torah really keeping that. And Jacob continues, it seems like the name stays. So these are the two discussions that we're going to dwell on. So I'm going to start with the second discussion, and then we'll go back to the first. So the second one is a very interesting the Talmud. The Talmud says that if you called Avraham Avram, you are transgressing the verse, do not call his name anymore Avram, call him Avraham. So we know that Avram's name was changed from Avram to Avraham. And the Talmud says that if you call Avraham Avram, you're transgressing that verse. There's a discussion among the halachic codifiers if it's really a biblical commandment, but some say it is. Now, the Talmud says, really? What about if you call Jacob, Jacob? Are you going to say also you're transgressing? And they rely on this verse. The verse here in this parsha says, do not call his name. His name will not be called more Jacob. Rather, Yisrael should be his name, Yisrael. So the verse seems to be similar to Abraham's verse, where Abraham, it says you can't call him anymore Avram, you have to call him Avraham. So the Gemara says it seems like Jacob would have the same rule, and we don't find anyone being careful not to call Jacob by the name Yaakov, Jacob. We call him Yisrael. So the Gemara says, well, that's different. Jacob is different because we find that Jacob's name, even after his name is changed to Yisrael, he's called Jacob even afterwards in the Torah. So we see the Torah doesn't mean that you're not allowed to call him Jacob. It's just giving him another name. Your name is not only Jacob, it's also Yisrael. In other words, the Torah itself seems to be implying that it doesn't mean literally you're not allowed to call him that anymore. It's that his main name is not Jacob, it's Yisrael, it's equally Yisrael and Jacob, but it's not only Jacob. And with Avraham, we don't find that. Once Avraham's name is changed from Avram to Avraham, that is a done and over. He's a new person. He's not going back. And don't call him anymore Avram. You got to call him Avraham. So that's the Talmudic statement about our parsha. And
Rabbi Smith.
Yes.
Did this injunction against calling Avraham Avram make it into the Shulchan Aruch? Does it? Is that how we're supposed to treat it today?
So if you want to look it up, it's a Gemara in Brachos, the page 13, and it's also it's brought in the Shulchan Aruch, the end of chapter 156 in the Magen Avraham. So it is brought in Shulchan Aruch.
So that means no longer when we name baby boys Avraham, we never use Avram. It's always Avraham.
Well, now it doesn't say about naming someone. It says about calling Avram Avram. So, if you want to say that that it applies to naming a baby, I don't know if that's taking it more than, further than what it says there. You might, you could maybe look it up and see if it mentions such an idea, but that's not necessarily, do you have to take it that far? It is in a Magen Avraham there in, in that chapter of Shulchan Aruch. And I'm just 156. And I'm just pulling it up here. So if you want, I could maybe, anyway, maybe we'll look it up. But in any event, it is broad in Shulchan Aruch. Okay, so yes, Ben.
But there's other people that had a name change. Sarah had a name change.
Right.
Yoshua had a name change.
True.
Does it apply to all of them?
That's a good question. I don't know that it says a prohibition on the others. Here it says, do not call v'lo yikarei shimcha. The name should not be called. So
yeah.
So it doesn't seem like it, like it would, prohibit, to go that far. But it applies to, applies to Avram. But one of the places to look it up would be this Talmudic statement, where we could look it up and see what the commentaries on the Talmud say if they connect it with any other prohibitions. But the Talmud,
we're going to get there pretty soon.
What is that? We'll get there, right?
We're going to get there pretty soon.
We're 6 pages away. That's right. For anyone that's interested, they could join our morning class. We're 6 pages away. So in about 6 pages, we'll get there, which is about in a month, month and a week. So in any event, the question is, what does this mean to us? And why is it that Yaakov's name doesn't fully change to Yisrael? Why is Avraham's name different? That's the real question. Why is Yaakov still Yaakov? If Hashem really wanted it changed, let's do the same like we did to Avram and call him Avraham, call him Yisrael. Yes, Will.
I was to answer your question. Avram wasn't a Hebrew name. I read, and I think I included it in my essay of Lech Lecha, that it was a name of his local area, which he was being asked to leave.
Okay.
Where Yaakov is from Yitzchak, and it would have to have been a reason. Every name has a reason, and the reason is in Hebrew. So already he's got a Jewish name.
So I don't know if you have to emphasize what you're saying, that it's Hebrew or not Hebrew. I think the emphasis is that Avram meant a father to Aram, and now Hashem says he's a father to the whole world, Av Hamoim Goyim, father of many nations. So you could say that even Avram is sort of a Hebrew name, but it's emphasizing he's a father to Aram, and now he's really the father of everyone, father of many nations. And therefore, we want to emphasize that. And somehow Yaakov, we're keeping the meaning of both names. So in other words, you don't have to say if it's Hebrew or not Hebrew, but you could say that it has to do with the meaning. And you're right. That's really, that really is somewhat of the connection, the answer. But the question is why? What is the meaning of Yaakov that's supposed to stay and Yisrael? So what does Yaakov mean? What does Yisrael mean? So that's what we're going to be going into. Does anyone have any other questions? Okay, so Yaakov, what does Yaakov really mean? So Yaakov, actually Rashi tells us here. Yaakov, Rashi tells us, I mean, we know when Yaakov's name was Yaakov, when he was named Yaakov, it was because he was holding on to the heel, right? The Akev means the heel. But Akev also means it has a few meanings. And Rashi tells us, don't call him anymore Yaakov. His name should not be called anymore Yaakov. Rashi says that that is a term of someone who comes with deceit. Ma'arav ve'ikva. And these two words mean ambush and treachery. And so the correct or the name that Hashem is giving him now is a lashon sar v'nagid. It's a term that means an officer and a nobleman. So we're now saying that Yaakov should no longer be called Yaakov, which means ambush and treachery or deceit. And instead, his name should be Sar v'Nagid, a officer and a nobleman. Now, do you think it's right that Yaakov should be called deceit? That's, I would think that if his name is changed to an officer and a nobleman, that would be even more important to change his name completely and get rid of the old name. And yet we don't find that. We find that Avraham, who wasn't such a degrading name, his first name, you're not allowed to call him. But Yaakov, you could still call him. You could still call him Akev, the Yaakov. So the question is, why is that? And that's a very strong question. And the answer to that question is that the Jewish people have two paths that we take. At different times, we have different avodas, we have different jobs. And one of those jobs is to serve Hashem in a way of Akev, in a way of Yaakov. In other times, we're supposed to serve Hashem in the way of Yisroel. What do I mean? Well, to preface this, I'm going to share with you a thought that's brought when we speak about Yaakov doing his act of deceit when he, in a slight way, where he told his father that he is Esav. And one of the commentaries explains that what Yaakov was really doing was he was correcting the deceitfulness that started with the snake. The snake was sly, and it got Eve to sin, which ultimately got Adam to sin. And why did they sin? Because of the slyness of the snake. So one of the commentaries explains that Yaakov was actually elevating this sin that the snake did by using deceit for a positive purpose, not for sin, but actually in order to get the blessings for the right person, for the Jewish people to get the blessings. So he used a method which was ultimately going to be misaking, to be like a atonement for the sin of the snake. So that's just a little preface. And what that does is it gives us an idea about using the concept of slyness in a holy way. Now, what does that mean practically? So practically speaking, our job on earth is to elevate the world around us. We are supposed to be refining the world. How do we refine and elevate the world around us with holiness? You see, everything in the world conceals God. There is very few things that reflect Hashem. Most things in the world conceal Hashem. Maybe a very righteous person, a tzaddik, he reflects God. You could see he's a man of God. Our soul, our neshama, reflects Hashem. It wants God. It wants to reveal godliness in the world. But everything else in the world covers over and hides Hashem. The world is a concealment. And our job is to reveal Hashem in everything that we do and elevate the sparks that are concealed in all of the physical things that we come in contact with. So the trick of elevating the world is by acting in a way similar to the way Yaakov acted when he needed to get the blessings. What did Yaakov do to get the blessings? He dressed up in clothing that it says was Nimrod's clothing. Nimrod was the king, and Yaakov wanted to elevate the sparks from that clothing. And so he put those clothing on in order to get the physical blessings of Mital Hashamayim Umishmane Haaretz. He wanted to get the blessings that Isaac was giving him, was going to give. How did he get those blessings? He had to dress up in in garments that weren't his normal garments, in a sly way. In this way, he was able to get the blessings, the physical blessings, the materialistic blessings that Isaac was giving. And so he wore those clothing in order to absorb, in order to be able to connect with and refine and elevate those the physical and materialistic things, the sparks that are hidden within the material world. Now, what this means is that we have to continue Yaakov's job. That means that Yaakov acts in a sly way, and we, when it comes to materialistic things, we also have to follow that path. What is that path? Well, when a person is sly, what do? They don't tell you everything that they're thinking. And then in the last moment, they do what they want to do. So they go along with you. What does a sly person do? He goes along with you all the way. And then in the last moment, he does his thing. That's sly. Well, we are supposed to refine the physical and materialistic things that we come in contact with. But the materialistic and physical things that we come in contact with, when we're acting, when we're dealing with them, it looks like we are enjoying and indulging in all these materialistic things. But really, what do? Yeah, sure, we want, let's say, for example, we buy ourselves a beautiful house and right on the water, has a boat, it comes with a yacht. Great. We have the greatest materialism you can imagine. And it's just beautiful, it's stunning. I mean, it has everything you could ask for. And so we go along with it. But then in the last moment, what do we really do? We start inviting guests. We start sending out donations to organizations. anyone who's collecting money from Israel comes and, of course, comes for a meal, and they know that they can always pop in. So we have Torah classes in our house. We start having monthly events for the community, women's events. All of a sudden, our house that looked like we were indulging in the most physical materialism that's possible, we're really using for holiness. So when it comes to material matters, just like Jacob was getting the blessings, how did he get the blessings? He used, in a certain sense, he used an element of slyness to get those blessings. That idea, that path is the same path, in a certain sense, we use when it comes to material things. We look like we're getting involved in enjoying the material world just to indulge, but it's not true. The last moment we pull out, we're indulging, we're getting the greatest physical materialism, but we're pulling out and we're actually using everything for the right purpose. And that is the idea of Yaakov. That is the idea when it comes to material matters. We use this slight trickery type of thing, that we look like one. It looks one way. It looks like one thing, but really we're actually utilizing everything for holiness. And we're trying to elevate this beautiful house that we just bought, that maybe before us was used just to indulge in the material world, and we use it for good purposes. And the same thing is not just the house, same thing as our car, same thing as, we go out to eat in restaurants, we go on vacations, everything that we're in, our clothing, all of our material things are, in a certain sense, used for holiness. Now, that is the name Yaakov. The name Yisroel means Sar v'Nagid, a nobleman and a officer. And what does that refer to? That refers to when we are in a revealed state of holiness. For example, on Shabbos. On Shabbos, we don't have to hide anything. We start the meal with our kiddush. We go to shul for a few hours, come home, we're making kiddush, we're involved in a totally spiritual state. We're not really hiding anything. It's very clear that we are involved in a spiritual ceremony. And during the week, things look like it looks like we're getting involved in our material world. On Shabbos, it's quite revealed what we're doing. Everyone knows. It's in no way are we doing anything in a hidden way, in a sly way. And so therefore, the difference between Yaakov and Yisrael, in a certain sense, is the difference between the weekday way of serving Hashem and the Shabbos way of serving Hashem. Now, the weekday, it does say that our job is mainly to elevate the physical world. On Shabbos, interestingly enough, our job is not to elevate the physical world. On Shabbos, we're like above that. On Shabbos, we're involved in the spiritual. We're a little on top of, we're beyond the physical war that we are fighting with the physical world. On Shabbos, we're like a step above. And that's the difference between Yaakov and Yisro. Now, there is a verse in this parsha that says that the reason why your name is Yisroel is because you sarisa, you fought, you wrestled with Elohim and with Anoshim. What does that mean? That means that Yaakov, Jacob, had to fight. He had to wrestle with Elokim, which means angels, and he had to fight with people, which the simple meaning is Lavan and Esav. So Yaakov had to fight with these people. He fought with the angel, Im Elokim. Now, if you translate that on a deeper level, so fighting with the angels, we know that the physical world, everything in the world that's physical, is the source of sustenance for all physical things, comes from what's called the 70 Sarim, the 70 angels that are in charge of the 70 nations. And those 70 Sarim above, it's like the guardian angels of each nation, of each country. And those Sarim, those angels, are the ones in charge of the physical world. And when it says that Yaakov had to fight, that means that he's fighting with the physical world, with the angels, because all the physical things come ultimately from those angels. In other words, the pathway of receiving all the physical pleasures in this world, it goes through those angels. And the fact that Jacob had to fight in this world with the angels means that he had to fight with the materialism, and he had to fight with Lavan and Esav, which are people who laughed at him. Interestingly enough, the first chapter of the Code of Law is that you shouldn't be affected by people that are laughing at you. Don't be embarrassed of people laughing at you when you're serving Hashem. That is the exact meaning of the type of avodah that Jacob has to do. Jacob is the type of person that is being laughed at by Esav and Lavan, by people who are laughing at him serving Hashem, by your cousins who aren't religious, and they're laughing at you for being so religious. That is the idea of Yaakov, that you gotta continue. You're involved in a fight. There's a war going on, and you are fighting this war. That's Yaakov. And you're fighting the war, you're involved in the war, but you act in a sly way. And that is that you're involved with the war. You don't just leave the war and go sit in a synagogue. No, you're dealing with the world around you, and yet you're elevating, you're trying to reach any potential spark that you can come in contact with, and you're elevating it. That's the idea of Yaakov. That's the idea of during the week, the type of work that we do during the week. And on Shabbos, you become above that. You elevate above that. And not only do you not have to fight with them, but on Shabbos, they sort of agree, just like in the parsha where Jacob fought with the angel, and the angel admitted to his blessings. What does that mean on a deeper level? That means that after you finish fighting, like for example, Shabbos, you're now beyond the war, and you're at a level where even those that were fighting with you, they are now admitting that you are the one who's correct. That's the idea of Yisrael. So again, let's just summarize. So we said there's two types of ways of serving Hashem. There's the way of serving Hashem that's called Yaakov, and there's the way of serving Hashem that's called Yisroel. And the way that you, the difference between the way of serving Hashem Yaakov and the way of serving Hashem Yisroel, is one of the examples is the difference between the weekday and Shabbos. Another example is while you're feeling yourself having numerous obstacles serving Hashem, that would be like the Yaakov way of dealing, involved in the world. And then when you have no more obstacles, that would be more like the Yisrael way of serving Hashem. Now, there is a verse in the Torah in the prophecy of Bilam, and it says, "Lo hibit oven b'Yaakov, v'lo ra amol b'Yisrael," that God doesn't see any crookedness in Yaakov, and he doesn't see any toiling in Yisroel. Interesting. We have the word Yaakov in the same verse and the word Yisroel in the same verse. One verse has both names, and it says that Yaakov does not have any crookedness. Hashem doesn't see any crookedness, any sins in Yaakov, and he doesn't see any toiling in Yisroel. What does that mean? That in Yaakov, he sees toil. There's a lot of work. It's hard work. Yaakov is hard work. Yisroel is almost like there's no toil. It's almost like he's not, his job is not to do the dirty work. He's graduated. And that refers to, you could divide that between the weekday and Shabbos. During the week, we're fighting with the physical world around us. On Shabbos, we're like a step higher. Or it could also refer to like a person who has a lot of obstacles in serving Hashem. That would be the person who's has a lot of toil. He's working hard to serve Hashem. And the other person is the person who's like graduated already. He's finished serving Hashem with all the obstacles, and now he's able to elevate to higher levels. And that would be the Yaakov, the Yisrael part. So we have this verse that says Hashem doesn't see any sins in Yaakov, and that means that he's working hard, but he doesn't have any sins. And that's because he's busy elevating, refining, working on the animal side of him, the obstacles that he's dealing with. And but Yisroel, he's really just going from one level of holiness to the next level of holiness. This is similar to what the Talmud says, that after you finish shul, you're supposed to go to the Beis Medrash. After you daven, you're supposed to go study Torah. And the Talmud gives a verse. It says, Yelchu mechayel el choyel. You go from strength to strength. That means that in holiness itself, you go from one level of holiness to the next level of holiness, and you're just climbing the ladder of holiness. That's the idea of Yisroel. But the idea of Yaakov, the type of work of Yaakov, is you're not really jumping up to the next level. You're still fighting. You've got a big war that you're involved in, and you're dealing with that war. And in fact, there's a verse that says, Al tidra avdi Yaakov, don't be afraid, my servant Yaakov. What does that mean? That Yaakov is like a slave. Yaakov is the one who works hard. Yaakov's got hard work ahead of him. That's the idea, that's the concept here, that Yaakov is busy refining the animal the animal side of him, his evil inclination, and he's trying to elevate it. He's busy elevating the sparks. And Yisroel doesn't have that job. Now, let's connect this to the name again. Yaakov means heel. It also means this deceptiveness. We explained already the deceptive part, that he gets involved in the let me just mute everyone. He gets involved in the material world. We explained that already. But what does it mean, Yaakov being the heel? And the answer is that when Yaakov is called Yaakov, it's because his soul is not so revealed. It's like the heel which is really not so sensitive. It's like the godliness is not revealed, and it's only revealed like the heel. But the animal soul is hiding the godliness. That's the idea of Yaakov, that it's a revelation of only the heel. Yisroel is a revelation of the head of the soul. That means it's not just the heel that's revealed, it's the head is revealed, meaning the major part of the soul is revealed. And because the major part of the soul is revealed, therefore, he doesn't have to get so involved in fighting the animal side of him, or fighting the animal outside of him, fighting the physical world around him. And that is generally the difference between the tzaddik and the Baal Tshuva. This is almost like what we once mentioned, that there are many people that have a bumpy road, that they have to serve Hashem on a bumpy road. Other people have more of a smooth path. It doesn't mean they don't have to work, but they don't have to do the same type of work. It's a whole different ballgame. They're just going in within holiness. They're going from one level of holiness to the next. While the bumpy road people are busy fighting this, dealing with this obstacle and that obstacle. And that's the difference between Yaakov and Yisroel. And that's why Yaakov's name doesn't change completely. He has two names, but it's not that you don't call him Yaakov anymore, because God created the world in a way that there's always going to be Yaakov and there's always going to be Yisroel. We always have to serve Hashem in both paths. For example, the difference between Shabbos and weekday. There's always going to be elements where we serve Hashem in a way of Yaakov, in the way we serve Hashem in the way of Yisroel. Now, obviously, every Yid has the ability to overcome. We're going to win. Even Yaakov won over Esav. We have the ability to win, and knowing that, of course, gives us the excitement. Of course, joy is especially important, to be confident and be joyous that we will succeed. That is a method of being able to overcome the obstacles. And the joy, it says, even when you go to war, soldiers sing a song of a joyous song when they go to war, even though they're going to a place of danger, but they are the song, the simcha of the song, it gives them the confidence, and it gives them the, it helps them win the war. So therefore, it's interesting, there is a song that is traditional, maybe not in Lubavitch, but it is a traditional song in the, generally, in the general Zemiros, the songs that are sang on Saturday night. Al tira avdi Yaakov. Don't be afraid, my servant Yaakov, which is based on that verse in Isaiah. That, and what that song means is, you're going from Shabbos. Shabbos, you had no problems, no tsaros. You were out of this world on Shabbos. Now you're going back to the physical world. Now you're going back to the war zone. Al tira avdi Yaakov. Don't be afraid, my servant Yaakov. You should not be afraid. And that's the song on Saturday night, that when you're going back into the week, the weekday type of work, you shouldn't be afraid to get into it. Even though it's going to be a war zone, you will overcome it, you will win, and ultimately you will reach a level where we totally refine the world and make the world completely Shabbos, like it says, Yom Shekulei Shabbos. May we merit that speedily in our days. So that is the first discussion that I wanted to share with you of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. It's a beautiful insight onto the fact that there's two names. Yaakov and Yisrael has both names, and that symbolizes the entire Jewish people. We know Yaakov symbolizes the entire Jewish people, and he's considered Yisrael Saba, Israel our grandfather. And so if he had both names, that means each of us have both names to us. And as I mentioned, they both apply to us at different times in our lives. And in a general sense, it's like the weekday and Shabbos. In a more specific sense, it might apply when a person is dealing with a lot of obstacles, or if they're not. And that is, this is the meaning of the fact that our name is Yaakov, which means deceit, and it also means heal. Things are being concealed from the godliness of our soul is concealed. And it's also, we have to act in a way of slyness, and ultimately we are able to overcome the temptations that we are faced with. And we also have to deal with
What volume
Yisrael.
is this?
What?
What volume?
What volume of the Lubavitcher Rebbe Sichos is this?
Yeah.
Volume 3.
Yeah, Rabbi Smith. Rabbi Smith.
Yes.
Question. Sometimes there's a nun that gets into Yaakov. How does that happen?
Yankele.
Right.
Where does Yankele come from? That's a good question. Yankele comes from, I'm not sure if it's just a Yiddish slang, but the nun has to do with the ayin, the letter ayin. You see, Ashkenazic people, we don't know how to really pronounce an ayin. But the real way of pronouncing an ayin is and an aleph is but an ayin it's and somehow it sounds like the letter nun. Now, us Ashkenazic people, we don't really deal with that. But I believe that's where you have people pronouncing Yankov, or somehow because there's the letter I in there, and they're trying to pronounce the ayin properly. But it also might be connected just to the Yiddish term. In any event, I don't advise people to do when they're davening Elokei Yaakov to pronounce the nun. I don't know if that's appropriate.
But there is no ayin in Yaakov, is it?
As far as I know, Yaakov is an ayin. Yud ayin Akev. The word ayin, the word Akev starts with an ayin.
I was thinking of the traditional spelling of Yaakov.
How do you think it's spelled?
Let's see. Yod, Kuf, Vav, Base.
So it's Yud ayin Kuf base. That's the traditional spelling. Yud ayin Kuf base.
It's Yaakov.
And that's why it's called Akev. V'yodoi achezes ba'akev Esav. And the akev is also with an ayin. So anyway, the second thing that I wanted to share with you is a little connected to this, and that is what I started with in the beginning, that the Torah starts the Torah starts with this parsha that Yaakov is sending these emissaries, these angels to his brother, and he's telling him that I kept the Torah, kept the 613 mitzvahs, something that I don't think Esav cares about. And why is he telling him that? And also, how does that connect to the literal meaning of the word im Lavan garti? I lived with Lavan, or I was a stranger with Lavan. And on that word garti, I was a stranger with Lavan, the gematria, the numerical value of stranger is 613. What does that have to do with being a stranger in Lavan's house, fulfilling the 613 mitzvahs? I understand it's the same numerical value, but if it has the same numerical value, it's supposed to have a connection to the original word. In living in Lavan's house doesn't seem to have a connection to the concept of Garti 613 connected to being a stranger. And the final question is, so what is the lesson for us? So the answer to these questions is that how did Yaakov stay so religious? He was stuck in this house of Lavan. He's got all different types of problems going on. His father-in-law is cheating him. And how did he stay so careful to keep all the Torah and mitzvahs? Even in Lavan's house, no one was looking at him, and he's got everything going against him. You would think he would be maybe angry at Hashem, chas v'shalom, or for sure it doesn't have to be so strict, And yet, how did he stay so strong? So the answer is that the way he stayed strong was the fact that he looked at all of the physical and material things in a way of a stranger. He treated it as if this is not the important, this is not important on its own. Every material thing that he had or that he came in contact with, he dealt with as if he was a stranger, as if it wasn't really his house. He felt like a visitor. He felt like just passing through. This is not really his. And that's the meaning of the word im Lavan Garti. I was a stranger with Lavan. And that's the meaning of I kept the Torah mitzvahs. How do you keep the Torah mitzvahs when you're in Lavan's house? Because you're a stranger. That's the connection between the gematria, the numerical value of stranger, and the word stranger, the numerical value, which means I kept 613 mitzvahs. And the way I kept it was because I treated all the materialism as if it was strange to me, meaning what was real to me was my soul. Everything else was in a certain sense, like not so important, not so significant to me, at least for its own, for its own sake. It's important to me to elevate it. It's important to me to utilize it for holiness, but it wasn't important intrinsically for its own, for its own physical purposes. And that's what he says. Jacob says that he built for himself a house, and for his possessions and his animals, he built sukkahs, a sukkah. What's a sukkah? What's the difference between a sukkah and a house? He built for himself a house, and he built for his possessions a sukkah. A sukkah is a temporary dwelling. A house is a permanent dwelling. For himself, he made sure to build, for himself meaning his soul, he made sure to build a permanent dwelling, meaning a real important matters. In other words, things that were applicable for his neshama, he made sure to have. Anything that his soul needed, he made sure to have. That's the bias. For his soul, he had a house, but for his physical possessions, a tent. He had a temporary dwelling. And this is the idea that the materialism to him was more like strange. Now, this doesn't mean we shouldn't have materialistic things. We should have all the physical things that are important, and we should live in a good, live like a mensch, live good, live well. But the things that we have should be looked at in our eyes as if they are not as significant for their own sake. That's the idea of being like a Lavan Garti, living with, being a stranger with the materialism, is the idea of being able to realize the value of our neshama, of our purity and holiness, versus the people who think of the material world as the most important thing. And it doesn't mean to separate from the material world, but it means to not see it as intrinsically important for its own sake. And that's what Jacob said, that I have soin eved v'shivcha. I have to me, meaning that I've used everything for holiness. He was able to elevate all his material things for holy purposes, for spiritual purposes. He says, I have soin, he tells his brother, I have these sheep, I have servants, I have maidservants, I've got it all. But it's all to my soul. They're all used for my purposes, for the important spiritual things. And this is the way, this is all, of course, to bring the ultimate redemption. We have to elevate everything in the world to ultimately bring Mashiach. And this is the answer. Why is he telling his brother Esav something that his brother probably doesn't care about? The answer is because the way Jacob is looking at the world, he is seeing the world has a purpose. There's a goal. And Esav also knows that there's a purpose. Esav is Jewish. He's just an individual who has fallen into the wrong, he's gotten himself dirtied up with bad things. But Esav knows that ultimately the world is going to have to come to a refinement. And so Jacob is hoping that Esav is ready to finalize this deal and to, let's just fix the world up now. I think we've had enough. Like after you've done enough, how much evil do you have to do till you realize you're not getting anywhere? Ultimately, even those that are, even those that enjoy evil, there's a limit. How much can you do already? There's a time when it's time to to realize that you're not getting anywhere. You didn't accomplish. It was fun. You had your fun, and now you've been there and done that. And now it's time to move forward. And you've heard from your father Isaac that we've got to fix up the world. And Jacob is saying, "Listen, I've done my part. Are you ready to finish things up? You got to do your job, Esav." Because when Yaakov and Esav, if they would both have done their jobs, that would be the ultimate coming of Mashiach. Yaakov and Esav, these are the two leaders that if they would just finish things up, we would have had the coming of Mashiach. And so Yaakov is telling Esav, I know you had no interest in Yiddishkeit 10 years ago or 20 years ago, but now he's telling him, listen, I've done my part. I'm ready to go forward. We can work things out. We can finally have Mashiach come. And Esav answers him, sorry, man, I've got 400 men with me, and we are going to be starting a war with you. We're not in any shape or form ready to work things out. We're not coming back. We've gone so far that we're not interested in returning. And that's what Esav answers Yaakov. Now, what is the lesson from this? The lesson is that even if the world is not ready, we still got to do our job. Even if Esav is not ready to come back, we still have to do our job. We've got to do our elevating our world. And ultimately, if we do that, you never know, we might tip the scale. As the Rambam says, that if one mitzvah could be the one that's going to tip the scale and make the world ready for the coming of Mashiach. Now, what is the preparation? How do we accomplish this? And I think this is the answer to the previous discussion of the Rebbe. What is the pathway? How do we accomplish being able to win over the Yaakov? In other words, when we're fighting with the physical world that's around us, they're laughing at us and they're making all these obstacles. How do we accomplish? How do we win over it? And the answer is, if we look at the physical world in a way that it is like a stranger to us, that we're not using it for its own purpose, but we're being sly in a certain sense. We're using it to be able to take it to holiness. We're taking the physical world and we're elevating it, refining it, utilizing it for the right purpose. Then that's the way we will succeed. We will be able to win over the obstacles that come our way, the Yaakov type of work that we have to do. We'll be able to win over it, and then the physical world won't be an obstacle anymore. Instead, it will ultimately join us. We'll be able to utilize everything we'll go from Chayil al Chayil, we'll be able to go in holiness itself, with the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days. Amen. And that concludes the second insight and concludes our class. If anyone would like to